Deep in the ancient pyramids of Egypt lives a secret that lay buried for neons. The plague that nearly engulfed the ancient world, buried underneath a tomb. With the virus now unleashed on the world accidentally, I had only but one choice. Save the testificates. There was only one village on Earth left. This challenge was not going to be easy. Not only did I need to survive 100 days from a zombie apocalypse, but I needed to save this village. If all the testificates died, I would lose. If I died, I would lose. Raids will happen, with the zombies mutating every time. The only way I can stop them is to use technology and rise above their primitive minds and secure the village. Can I survive 100 days? Let's find out. I can't thank you guys enough for the support on my content. I won't ask you to subscribe or like on this video as y'all are pod champs already, and you've given me everything I could ask for. Enjoy the video. As I fell into a brand new world, I began to look around to see what was immediately around me. I met a villager named Alan. Alan was about to trust me with his life and his home. Interesting choice, Alan. Guarding this village from a zombie and raider apocalypse was going to be an entirely new challenge. I began gathering some basic supplies around the village, getting my starter tools, and trying to find some food. I made myself some stone tools, and then began adventuring. As the days would go on and the world would get harder, I would need to do all the adventuring between my raids, otherwise I would have no time to leave the village and I would be trapped inside. While exploring, I found a small shack with a thatch roof. Inside the shack, there was a trap door and I went down. I found a chest with an assortment of organic material. I also found a knife on the wall on the way out of the shack, so I snatched it. I continued exploring, and I found this giant tower in the distance, so I moved towards it. I began climbing the stairs inside. To all sides of me were cobwebs. No one had been living in here for ages. As I got to the top, I found another chest. Inside was some epic loot. This would help a lot, especially the Ender Satchel, as it would be a sort of backpack in the early game. I began gathering some more wood near the village to begin building some fences for a primitive defense against the undead. And then a psycho spider came out of nowhere. I could barely hurt it. I backed up and it chased. I was able to kill it, but it gave me a glimpse of how hard these mobs were going to be. All of them were going to give me debuffs whenever they came near me. You'll see in the future how difficult this freaking gets. When I woke up the next day, I looted the blacksmith inside of the village, which I had completely forgotten about. I then made my fences and began placing them around the perimeter of the village. The hordes that would be coming wouldn't be stopped by a fence, but it was the best I could do in the early game. I knew they'd be coming on day 10 as the first raid, so I had to be ready. I would not only need to defend from the zombie hordes though, but also from the looters and raiders who can break through blocks as of day 1. This would be insane. It took a while, but I eventually placed the entire perimeter all the way around the village. I wasn't so scared about the zombies at this point as the fences would keep them out. But the raiders, as soon as they broke through blocks, the zombies would follow. This was gonna be tough. It was now time to dive into the mines and see what adventures awaited. I could hear the undead growling, but I pushed through the caves, gathering all the ores I could see. Making some of these huge machinery, force fields, and other machines in this game would require an insane amount of resources. I met one of the undead in the caves, and made sure I kept my distance. Getting too close is a mistake I'd make later, and it's not pretty. I continued mining until I got a random potion effect. Zombies can now give you all negative effects when they are close to you, and they worsen if they hit you. This is insane. I found some diamonds in the cave, which was a nice turnaround of events. However, when I returned to the surface, I found a raider outside my fence. I was able to use the fence to kill him. Thankfully, this type couldn't break through walls. They had to have an axe in their hand if they were going to break through any wood. My village had been partially burned, but I didn't know how. When I got into my house to put my items away, a spider guarded the doorstep to leave. With no food, I had to make a decision. Either dead sprint or dig my way out of the house. I decided to dead sprint. By default, it was weird, so I got away. But by default, spiders don't attack you in the daytime, so I had no idea why he was so hostile towards me. I harvested some more food in the village, and then I found this vineyard-like place outside of the village. I was able to heal up completely, and this was enough saving from the spider. I heard this crying voice nearby, and I was confused. I began to dig down to see if I could find who was crying beneath the surface. I dug and I dug closer to the voice, but there was nothing. Just this ambient crying like it fit into the environment. I found this giant dungeon, but there was no way I could go in yet, as they almost killed me when I was just peeking around. This is just a sample of how dangerous these mobs are. I made a little drop zone for the mobs to fall into, and I attacked their ankles, but for the most part they didn't come. So I mined the nearby coal, and then I left. I continued mining in the cave nearby, forgetting about the voice that was calling for help. It was now time to mine. I wanted to explain this mod pack a little bit for those of you who aren't familiar with my type of content. I have made one of the hardest modded Minecraft packs out there. Here is a quick list of what we're up against inside of this world. As time goes on, less and less variants of mobs will spawn, and more zombies will spawn until only zombies and raiders are the mobs left. Zombies will increase in horde size, health, debuffs to the player as time goes on. Raiders will come more often and have the ability to light wood on fire, break through walls, kill villagers, and the player. They also deal debuffs, making it nearly impossible to kill them by hand. Blood moons will happen more frequently, which are essentially nights you can't sleep. Honestly, there is more, but let's get back to the video. When I emerged from the mine, I began looking around the defenses, no pun intended, to see if they had been breached. I met a raider outside, but he was too strong, so I left him. I wanted to go and gather some clay, gravel, and sand now. I could make grout, and with this grout, I could make seared bricks. These would be essential, as they are crafted into a multi-block structure called a smeltery. And with that, I can double resources by smelting them down and making special tools. As night fell, I made my way back to the village. I could see mobs sprinting around the outside. Inside the village, I met a raider who was impossible to kill, so I killed him, and then went to bed like a pog champ. The next day, I tore down what was left of a small house, and I made it into a small base camp. I didn't have time to build a house yet for myself, so this would have to do. Charisse came into my house and tried to sit there, but there was definitely not enough room, so I kicked them out. After doing some grunt work, I made my supplies into grout, and put it into a furnace. I then made another furnace. I heard explosions nearby, and found some more undead on fire. I had no idea what was causing these explosions, but I left my wall to try and kill some of the raiders. I assumed the zombies died from the sun as I got back because there was none left. I looted some crops and then repaired some of the breaches in the fences that the raiders had left. This was a losing battle and I needed to come up with a better solution fast. A zombie shocked me out of nowhere, but I was able to kill it. Guarding a village this big, this early in the game was no joke. Thankfully, they bred, so when I was going to lose some, they would also create some more. I threw another layer of fence down here and there to make it more difficult for the hordes to pass through. I then left the village looking for some lava. The smeltery would require lava to run. While exploring, I saw some amazing terrain. With all this amazing terrain around, it was too bad I was stuck in a village. I found a small volcano-like structure and stole some lava from it. I then began the construction of a smeltery. I made all the basic components and began its construction. A smeltery acts like a forge and melts down resources by doubling them. So 1 iron ore is made into 2 ingots. But if you put an ingot inside, it'll still just be 1 ingot, so it only doubles the actual ore. You then drain out the molten metals into a cast. The cast can be for a weapon, a tool, a block, of any ore that you placed inside. I began smelting down my ores from mining right away, as I need them for the first defense of the village. I left to go and find some more sand and gravel, as I wanted to expand the smeltery. When I got home, I made more grout and began smelting it down into seared ingots. That night, I used the darkness to find places to put torches down, so that when the first raid happened, there wouldn't be anybody spawning inside of my base. It was kind of a waste if there were walls, if you could actually spawn inside of the base itself. As morning broke, I found clumps of undead outside my base. Even though the horde was 2 days away, they were beginning to come in numbers now. I made some basins and poured the molten iron in to make a ton of iron bricks. Some of the raiders made it into my base and lit a house on fire. I sprinted back to my crafting table after my axe broke to make a new one. I don't know why, but axes seem to be able to do a lot more harm than any other weapon in the game when I'm under debuffs. But even though I could kind of hit them with the axe, it wasn't going to work very well. I was going to need to come up with more technical defenses to stop them. I chased down and killed the last raider. There was no stopping the house from being burned down though, so I left it. I trapped the last raider in a well and tried to drown them, but it didn't work. So he almost killed me and I left him alone to sit in the well and think about his life decisions. I then made some gold blocks and went to bed. It was now time for technology to begin. I planted some hemp, as it would be required later for some windmills. I then built a coal coke oven. When you smelt down coal in this oven, it gives you 2 byproducts. Coal coke, which is a better version of coal, and creosote oil, which can be used to make the windmills I'll need to generate power for some of the machines I have in mind. I then made myself a tool forge. This is used with my smeltery and can make more advanced tools the smeltery has to offer. Namely, I wanted a hammer. This would not only do a lot of damage for combat use, but would also mine a 3x3 area, which would help gather a ton of resources. I began by casting some plates. Casts are used to make parts of any tool. Fill the cast with a molten metal, and then you can combine it with the other parts to make the tool itself. I made my first iron hammer and headed out to grab some more supplies before the invasion that night. This hammer is overpowered. I found the dungeon under my base again. It expanded all the way out here. After grabbing a lot of cobblestone, I made some cobblestone walls. I wanted to double the walls around my base to make it more difficult, so that when night would come, they would at least have somewhat of a challenge to get through. After placing the walls all around, I placed torches everywhere I could find inside of my base that seemed dark. This was the first big challenge. If I could survive and my villagers, I had a chance. I then saw in chat, the blood moon was rising. Chills down my spine, but I kept placing torches. If they did beat me, it wouldn't be without a cost. As darkness came, I began seeing them outside my base. Spiders scaled the walls with ease, but I leapt, running around placing torches. I was okay with the spider breach, since my villagers would be fine. I made my way into my house after placing all the torches I could, and waited. There was nothing I could do now. I saw zombies inside the village, but all I could do at this point was cross my fingers and pray. As morning broke, I saw some of the villagers still alive and I sighed. I began walking around to see where the breaches were. I heard screams in the distance, but I kept along with my mission. I found spiders here and there and I killed them. After doing my perimeter check, I began working on the next tool. I'd have now until day 30 before the next horde arrived. They'd be much more dangerous though. I made a lumberjack axe. This could help me fell entire trees with one block broken. I ran around collecting wood to clear out the outside of my base from mob spawning. I needed the wood for my next project anyway. It was time to begin advancing in technology to fight this evil. I built a quarry using the supplies I had from mining. Quarries automatically mine out a designated area. I would need a ton of supplies to bring my base into the next age. After making the quarry, it was time to power it. I made treated wood by surrounding a bucket of creosote oil with wood. This stains the wood, and then it can be used to make the windmill parts. I placed more coal into the furnace and made the first windmill. Another zombie breached the village, but I was able to kill it before it hurt any of my villagers. I found a cave they were coming from, so I covered it up with some cobblestone. For the windmill to power the quarry, I needed a kinetic motor. This transfers the energy into a wire, so I can cause it to travel all the way down to the quarry. I smelted down some copper and then made it into wires and cable. After gathering all the supplies I needed, I placed the quarry. But I realized it was wrong. I made some markers. These would enable you to design where the quarry will work. While placing them though, I was attacked by another zombie. I killed him and moved on. I then designed my windmill. I tried connecting the wires directly, but it didn't work as it was obstructed by the kinetic motor. So I made a relay to put between them and then started it up. It was pretty slow, but I'd add more windmills later. I put a chest next to it and moved on for the day. I then took to the mines. I wanted to begin construction of some electrical fences and other machines. So using my hammer, I made tunnels everywhere below the surface collecting resources. I upgraded my hammer as I went. Your tools from the smeltery level up, and you can use modifiers as they level. Each level, you can add one modifier. In my case, I was adding redstone first. This would increase the mining speed. Iron hammers have almost no durability, which sucks, but they can be repaired with using iron. So it's a fairly common resource, therefore it's kind of a blessing, but also a curse at the same time. While in the mines, I was attacked, and I barely got away with my life. I used cobblestone to make a wall behind me and wall off the undead. When I returned, I made a new chest for all the ores. This way I could be somewhat organized. I then began tearing up the village a bit and filling in some of the larger holes, as villagers kept falling in them and getting stuck. I planted some more hemp seeds and did some repair to my farmland. I then ventured out looking for pumpkins. I had an idea for defense for when the next raid came on day 30. While adventuring, I found another thatched shack, and inside, I found some pumpkin seeds and some more organic material. This was perfect. When I got home, I bone mealed the pumpkins as I'd need them as soon as possible. I then smelted down some more ores. I found more raiders in the village, but I was smart this time and I used lava to kill them. It was now time to vamp up my power grid to make my quarry even faster. I made another windmill and put it beside the other one. This would double the speed. The hemp I was growing would make these windmills go even faster, but for the time being, this was the best option as they didn't have enough hemp to make them go faster yet. I did some more farming and smelting of resources. I made an alloy called Invar. It was going to be huge in making the windmill power grid because it was going to be used for making the cables. Eventually what I wanted to do was I wanted to make 6 or 7 windmills, hook them up to a converter, and then have the cable running from the converter to my entire village. This way I can power whatever I need in the early game. I gathered some more food and then made a fluid duct. This would help me automate the smeltery. The molten liquid could run through the pipes into the basin and that output into the chest. That night, I made my first new defense, iron golems. These big boys were buff from originals and would be my best defense in the early game against the next raid on day 30. I continued lighting up the village. As morning came, more and more clumps of zombies were outside my fence. This next raid was not going to be easy. I then headed back to the mines and began gathering more resources. If I wanted a huge power network from my miners, I'd need to get a lot of iron. I also wanted to get a lot of iron golems for the next defense. So, iron was pretty essential at this point. I returned home and began smelting down all the ores I had. I used a hopper on the front of the smeltery to input the ores. I worked a little bit more on farming and the hemp seeds. I then turned on the auto output for my smeltery. It looked pretty cool as it filled up the basins. I spent a little time bringing down some trees and placing torches around the base to make sure nothing could spawn inside. Day 30 was looming over me, and I had to be ready. I then began construction on my own base. I wanted to make something under the ground for the utmost protection. I mined out an area, and while I was staircasing down, I found an empty cavern right above that dungeon. I decided to build along the cavern, and I used the natural generation for walls and a ceiling. I then designed a little entrance into the base on the outside. I spent the next bit transferring items into the new base. I used diamond chests from the iron chest mod to hold resources, as they hold a ton of items. Eventually, I'd need a better storage system, but I didn't have the time to focus on that now. We needed to defend against the next raid. I did some more farming the next day. I did some base maintenance, and I smelted down some of the stone into seared stone to expand the smeltery. I then made a bunch of treated wood. I had an idea for a windmill farm now, and it was soon time to put it in action. I made some lead from the smeltery, and then leadstone flux ducts. I then used the invar to transfer them into hardened flux ducts. These would transfer power from my windmills around my base. I made a flat area to build the windmill farm. I spaced out the windmills evenly, and used fence poles again to build the basic structure. I placed all the kinetic engines on top, placed the windmills, and tore down the old ones. Eventually, I had all 5 together. I used low voltage connectors to connect them all to a relay, and then the relay to a cell. The cell holds energy. I connected my flux ducts to the cell, and from there, I had all the power from one source. I placed some windmill sails on the windmills that I made from the hemp seeds. Eventually, when I had enough and I could put sails on all the windmills, it would almost triple my output. I then constructed a bunch of electrical fences. They were cheaper than I thought. This would zap anyone who touches it. I terraformed the ground a bit to place the fences outside my cobblestone wall. This way, I'd have 3 walls for the horde to try and get through. After I finished the walls, I began working on my next idea. I needed to draw all the zombies to one point instead of spreading them everywhere. I headed back into the mines to gather some more iron for the golems. I would need a ton to stop the next horde. When I got home, I expanded my smeltery and placed all my new iron inside. I then went to a flat area on one of my walls and designed what I call a kill box. The zombies are attracted to noise and light, so if I could create something loud and bright, then I could draw them here, and at least I'd have some control over where the horde was going. I used redstone and pistons to create pistons that automatically would keep going and make a lot of noise. Night was coming quick. I needed more pumpkins, so I placed down more golems. As night fell, I saw in chat, Blood Moon was rising. It was time. I went into my kill chamber and began making golems. A zombie in full armor made its way into the zone right away. I pillared on top and tried to bow him. Instead, I used my golem to destroy him though. I turned on the noisemaker and made more golems, but I was quickly overwhelmed. All sorts of effects and zombies as they began to pour in. The golems were doing decent, but I saw a horde coming and I knew this could be bad. Then Bert was slain by a zombie. I'm not sure who Bert is, but it was tragic. The goal was to keep all their attention and spawning on one side of the base. Then, some sort of wizard shot a fireball at me from the horde. The golems were at least clogging up the zombies, but they weren't doing great. Well, little did I know, they were breaking down the door I had used to come in and out. I climbed a roof and bowed the enemies from a distance as they broke through the wall. The golems were doing okay, but nowhere near what I needed. The village was overrun. Only the sun could save me now. As day broke, I used lava to clear out the mobs, as I couldn't touch them or I'd be killed instantly. I walked around the village and found some villagers still alive, thank God. But the village was torn to bits. The next raid wasn't coming until day 60. But I also knew that if I was only this prepared, the next raid would end me. I'd need to revamp defenses. I used this time to go and explore, since I had a while before the next major raid came. I wandered around and looked at the amazing terrain this world generates. I found this odd structure with a spawner beneath it. I then found this castle-like object on a hilltop and I went inside. I went down the stairs and found some chests with a fire charm and basic metals inside. When I opened the second one, I heard a fuse. It blew up something in front of me, but I took no damage. I took the books as I wanted to make an enchantment setup. I found a ladder, and of course, I went down it, deeper into the castle. I broke through an iron door, and deeper I went. I found a room with a spawner, and I quickly broke it before it spawned mobs. I then looted the chests and bookshelves inside of the room. I found another ladder that led deeper. At the bottom, I heard zombies and saw a lot of cobwebs. I headed closer. I knew I couldn't go into the cobwebs, but the other side had some loot, so I ventured through. This strange mechanism went off, but I had no idea why as blocks emerged in front of me. I soon discovered as I heard a noise behind me, it was a trap with an anvil. The zombie had almost escaped from the webs after I finished looting the room, so I left. If they got free, I would be in trouble. I traveled back all the way to the surface. I found these really cool floating islands, but I knew it was time to return home at this point. When I arrived home, I found my base ruined from that raid. I made my way into my chest area to make sure it was fine. I then ran around the village to find the breaches. I grabbed some obsidian from the quarry as it was now time to enter the Nether. I wasn't excited for this, but the Nether is never a fun place in modded Minecraft. I needed some cobalt from the Nether, so it was time to take the next step. When I entered and looked around, it didn't look too dangerous off the bat, or different. I found diamond ore almost right away, which was crazy, but not what I was after. And then, after mining some ore, an explosion. Great. Ores explode. I mined all the quartz I found as well while I was looking for cobalt, because I would need it for later. Then a fire sheep started bolting towards me. What the heck is a fire sheep, I thought to myself. What kind of place is this? Eventually, after some looking around, I found some cobalt, but my pickaxe wasn't high enough level to mine it. I'd need to make something higher before I could mine it. Cobalt and ardite are the end game for the tool metals I would need. The fire animals kept coming at me. Whilst I was there, fire pigs, sheeps, cows, this place is ludicrous. I made my way back to my base and tried leveling up my iron hammer to see if I could get it to the cobalt mining level. I was learning that you could add modifiers to your tools to increase their mining ability, but the modifiers weren't working on the iron hammer. It was strange. I couldn't get it any higher than obsidian mining level, and I would need cobalt, which is the next step up. After doing some research, I discovered that emerald can mine cobalt. So I grabbed some gems and smelted them down. I made a cast for a pickaxe and then made an emerald pickaxe. I made my way back into the Nether, ready for the fire creatures and to collect a lot of ardite and cobalt. I mined a ton of it. When combined in a smeltery, they make an alloy called manilium. This is the strongest alloy in the game. When I got home, I began pouring out the metals from the smeltery and making casts for all the new tools I wanted to make. I combined the ardite and cobalt to make the manilium. I then made an excavator, and used redstone to level it up in speed. This would work similar to a hammer and mine dirt or gravel at a 3x3 radius. I made a manilium pickaxe and hammer, and leveled them up as well with redstone. Now that I had a tool set, it was time. I grabbed a ton of sand first for some smelting, as I'd need it later. When I arrived home, I made an auto smelter using an old-fashioned design of hoppers, chests, and an original furnace. I needed to smelt down a lot of sand and cobblestone for this next massive defense project. The hordes wouldn't know what hit them on day 60. We'd be ready. After finishing up the furnaces, I began working on terraforming the base. I needed a fairly flat surface to surround the compound. I was going to build super high-tech defense walls around the entire base. That would stop any horde from coming right through like the previous times. I could see them hiding in the caves, ready to emerge. I'd give them a real threat to show up. After picking the points on where the wall would run, I began chopping through the earth to make the surface flat enough for wall building. It was now complete. The first layer of defense would be a lava wall of a stone wall. So I'd have one layer of stone, lava, and then one layer of stone. So I began placing 2 rows of stone bricks. This is why I was smelting all the cobblestone from earlier. I didn't want to use cobblestone because that's just ugly. To get the lava to the walls, I had an idea. There is a mod that has a machine called a pump. A pump can extract any liquid from below it. With the Nether having enormous amounts of lava lakes, this was perfect. I could transfer the lava through ender tanks, and then get it cross-dimensional. I went back to the Nether, hoping I'd avoid these demon animals this time, and then, all of a sudden, half the landscape blew up behind me while I was searching. This is insane. I needed some blaze rods to make the ender tanks, so I ran to a nearby fortress. I almost died, but as the PogChamp I am, I was able to escape. It took a while, but I was able to grab all the blaze rods I needed. When I got home, I made the tanks and headed back into the Nether. I needed a spot above a large lake. I found one and I built the pump atop it. I was using redstone engines to power the pump. All they require is a redstone signal to work. They aren't very powerful, but they'll be enough to make the pump work. I placed the tank on top, and as soon as I did, the lava went inside. It was working. When I got back to the overworld, I built up walls using builder's wands. I placed down my tank and took buckets from it, and began placing them along the wall. This wall was going to be impenetrable. I then began mining out all my old electrical fences and placing them on the outside of my walls. I smelted down some more cobblestone, as I need more stone for the rest of the wall. I built up the rest of the wall and began placing lava all along it. I was really happy with the pump idea as it was essentially unlimited lava. I finished the lava wall inside of the stone brick wall by nighttime. Now came the big boys. For the next defense, I wanted to make turrets. But to make them, I needed electrical steel. To make electrical steel, I'd need an assortment of machines. First, I'd need to smelt down quartz to make silicone, and then I'd need pulverized coal, as the ingot I would need is a type of alloy. However, it can't be made in the smelter like the other alloys can. There was another special ingredient I would need. It's called infinity dust. To get it, you need to light bedrock on fire. Thankfully for me, I mined out a giant hole in the middle of the earth, which was a direct light to bedrock. So I dove down into the quarry's hole, all the way to the bottom, and then I used cobblestone to make a little hut. Since the water sources were much higher up, the water drained out of the hut. I was able then to light the bedrock on fire. I began to work on wireless power next, using flux points and flux plugs. A flux plug goes on the power source, and flux points go on the machines that you want to have power. They are a bit expensive, but they are amazing. After pulverizing the coal, I had all the resources necessary to make the electrical steel for the turrets. I dove back down because I needed more infinity dust though. It's a weird process of lighting bedrock on fire, and it makes me wonder if eventually the bedrock would break, as it seemed to be taking pieces of it each time with the dust. But I wouldn't think about that for now. After getting back to crafting room, I began to get all the components ready for the turrets. I then crafted my first turret and turret base. These things would be huge for the base defense. I didn't have enough resources to make too many of them, but if I could remake my kill box and have the turrets inside, it might just be enough to stop the hordes from entering the village. I placed the turret on the wall near the old kill box. I then began building the new kill box. I placed the turrets on the edge of the box and powered them using my new flux points. I then got ammo for them, It was fairly cheap, but I was lacking gunpowder to make too much of it. So I made all I could, and I filled the turrets up with the bullets. If I could attract a majority of the mobs to this zone, I had a better chance than last time of defending. I dug little holes in the ground and placed hoppers. This way, the mobs that were being shot by the turrets, I could collect their resources and hopefully some gunpowder with them. The next part of my plan was the bait. I tried to capture this villager in a boat to bring him to my trap, but he wasn't having it. Thankfully, this chap, though, was all arms for it. I didn't exactly tell him what he was about to do, but I figured he would be, happy to sacrifice himself for the village. This is completely normal. There's nothing to see here. I built him a glass enclosure so he could see what was going on. The idea was the iron golems would now protect him, whereas last time no villagers were near the site where the zombies were coming, so the iron golems didn't do much. This was the idea anyway. It would also attract all the horde towards this one villager as he was the easiest one to get access to. But what they didn't know was that's where my turrets and I was going to be. I set up the redstone noise trap again, and then repaired the wall I had bridged over. I gathered some pumpkins as night was coming, as it was time to get the iron golems set up. I built the iron part of the golems and set up the timer for the redstone. It was time. The chat informed me that the blood moon was rising. It was time to take a stand. I had my pumpkins out and ready this time to make the iron golems. I could see the blood moon rising in the distance. I could feel a little bit of adrenaline rush, but I stayed composed. The turrets began to fire, and I built the iron golems. I then jumped down and started the noise machine and pillared back up while being chased by zombies. With magical fireballs flying by the turrets, firing at me and everything around me, I ran back to the village to heal up. I continued shooting my bow to stop any mobs that tried to climb over the wall who made it past the turrets. I thought to myself, imagine what 20 of these turrets could do. I then ran around the village making sure no one got inside. I found some mobs that were climbing my old quarry, so I broke the quarry and all the mobs fell into the pit. I then began beating any mobs that had made it over into the pit themselves. We were holding out. For now. Then, all of a sudden, I saw a mass amount of them inside the lava wall with only the interior wall left keeping them out. I grabbed my turrets from the kill zone and put them on the breach. We were compromised. I had to hold the zombies at bay until the sun rose. In the little time, the interior wall had fallen. In the distance, I noticed cobblestone placed on the wall, but I didn't have much time to think about it. I jumped off and began smacking the zombies with my hammer that I'd gotten through the turrets. Just hold out till sunrise, I told myself. While I was running around like a chicken with his head cut off, I realized that the mutation of the zombies, they could build now. The wall was pretty much useless to the more advanced ones. It works a little, but not nearly to the scale we needed to hold off this raid. This became a holdout till sunrise raid, just like the last one. When the sun finally arose, I ran around the village smacking all the zombies that were left. I had no idea if any villagers had survived. I tried drawing the remainder ones to the turrets to help me kill them. After some time, we got them all cleared out. I went to the breached wall and saw the damage. They had pillared up using cobblestone. This was a danger to day 100. The day 100 horde would be huge, and if they could pillar now... Oh boy, all of a sudden I heard a scream, almost on cue with my panic for the situation. While walking around the village, this tiny man tried to size me up. I threw a potato at them to assert my dominance. I then ran to my smeltery and I made some manilium blocks. It was time for a major mining expedition. I gathered some last minute food and smelted it down. I wanted to make some pretty drastic base changes once I was back, but I needed a lot of supplies to do that. I took to the mines with my hammer and began smashing down 3x3 walls in every direction. This project was going to be huge to hold out against day 100. When I got home, I began smelting down all my new resources. After setting up the molten materials, I began doing some minor fixes around the village and tearing down the garbage from the last raid that I had built, patching holes in the walls, and everything else. With the iron finished, I placed some lead in the smeltery as well. I slowly was able to double all the resources. To make the next bit of technology I would need some slime. So I pillared up to the nearby slime island and began harvesting the trees on top of it. Then, I could get organized and begin producing the technology and armor enhancements to stop the next raid. I knew there was one fate looming over me though. Before advancing, I'd need to travel to a new dimension to gather an ancient relic. It wouldn't be easy, but I knew it was the final part to the steps of winning day 100. For now, I continued building all the components of a storage computer. And with everything ready, I made the storage itself, placed it in the drive bays, connected a flux point to the controller, and boom, organized storage. The most satisfying part of this is breaking all your old chests at once and transferring the items. I don't know, there's always like a sick satisfaction to that. I made my grid into a crafting grid, as that is way better. I then made an exporter and an importer. I wanted to send items from anywhere to my computer system. I connected it to an ender chest, then went to my chests outside from the quarry and had a pipe explore the items to an ender chest. This way, they could export the items from the ender chest to my computer, and then from there, anything around the map that I wanted to connect to my computer I could with an ender chest. It was perfect. The next step was to advance in power, and the best option for that was a nuclear reactor. So I began gathering components for it. I crafted a bunch of graphite, smelted down uranium for fuel, took one look at it and thought that looked safe. While the components for the reactor were smelting, I covered up the gaping hole from the quarry with dirt, and then built the reactor over it. The construction for the reactor is simple. The control rods in the middle hold the fuel, and then the casing surrounds it to keep the temperature as hot as it can. All of a sudden, explosions and fire happened nearby though. I ran around to try and figure out what was shooting at me, and I heard an awful scream. I got back to my task though, and I filled the edges of the reactor with water. Now, water is the worst coolant you can put in a reactor, but I had nothing else, so don't yell at me. When it was completed, I placed the last components and transformed into a multi-block reactor. Now, all that was left to do was place the uranium inside. Once placed, it began producing power. This was huge. This was a big step for windmills. I then completed my wall over the dirt pit, so the wall was complete and the zombies couldn't simply bridge over it. It was now time to start mass mining, so I built some quarries, and with my new powerful wireless power, I set them up. While outside gathering some supplies, I was attacked by a mini horde of zombies. They didn't burn, I yelled to myself. They were trapping me inside my compound. I needed a way to get out if I wanted to escape to a new dimension and get the relic I needed. I began working on the only solution I could think of: jetpacks. I made a leadstone jetpack, which is one of the worst, but it would do for now. And then I placed an energetic infuser to charge it. I heard my turrets go off while I was downstairs, so I ran up, but I saw no mobs. I then built an enchantment area. If I was going to go dimension hopping, I wanted the best chance of survival. I didn't start out strong, but I ended pretty well with the enchants. I enchanted all my gear and some bows. I ended up combining some bows to get Infinity and Power 4 onto one. I was nearly ready. I also discovered that you can craft gunpowder using coal and redstone. This was going to be huge to make bullets. I built a new corner for some of the new machines that I had inside of my base. I powered them up, and while waiting for them to charge, I ran around the village making sure everything was safe. The endgame armor I needed was called wyvern armor, and I began to look it up. This stuff would make me unstoppable, but getting it, well, was no walk in the park. While it was not going to be an easy feat, the first step was getting the relic from the other dimension. Now, with my jetpack charged, I flew outside my walls and began avoiding the clumps of zombies waiting for me. I needed to collect flowers, as they were my way into the new dimension. Eventually, after finding enough, I placed them around a pool of water and threw a diamond in. Lightning struck, and it was ready. As it began to rain, I hopped right in. When I entered the dimension, the first thing I saw was a massive structure, but when I got near it, I remembered that I needed to complete other quests before going inside, as it wouldn't let you. And I was there for another reason anyway. I found this cool willow tree while I was searching around, and I tore it down to get its saplings. I found some cute animals as well that tried to give me a stare down. This place is nice. A very warm welcome, as some might say. I later escaped to two blue goblin-like men who brought me down to half a heart. What is this place? I found this massive castle structure, but it was guarded by some sort of acidic rain. After some time though, I found what I was looking for. The home of the Naga, who guarded the relics I would need. I began to engage. We could only hit it in the head, and at first it was freaking crazy fast. My new enchants were proving useful though, as I slowly brought it down. It managed to anger the nearby wolves who also attacked it. Nice going. I began to melee it with my hammer, but I soon switched back to my bow. I then ran up to it and I finished it with the hammer. The relic didn't drop, so it had to be kept somewhere in the dungeon. After some looking around, I found some chests, and inside, I found it. The Nth Charm. And another relic I didn't expect. The Nth Charm would make me immune to negative status effects, which would give me a lot of strength to go against the mobs that were wrecking me before. It was my time to step up and show this world who was the freaking boss. It's me, by the way, I'm the freaking boss. Anyway, when I got back, I began working on a powerful tool. To craft wyvern armor, I would need 20 nether stars. To get that many withers though, I would need a cleaver, a powerful beheading weapon. With adding beheading modifiers, it would become the ultimate wither skeleton head dropper. To add the modifiers, you just needed ender pearls and obsidian. I had beheading 5 on it. I then added quartz to my other sword, which enabled sharpness. Before heading into the nether, I grabbed all the regeneration fruit from the gazebo and then headed inside. I found a fortress and began traveling around, but I couldn't find any skeletons. I tested out the sword on a creeper and got 2 heads from it. Holy crap. This fortress seemed eerily empty. I looted some of the chests while I waited and found some cool items inside. After being attacked by a demon cow, I continued looting. I ran around the fortress for what seemed like forever, looting all the chests I could find, till finally I found a couple of skeletons. A few. Holy biscuit, there's every skeleton on Earth and their mother. They all showed up at the exact same time. It was great, except for the fact that they were trying to kill me. It was quite dangerous, but I got all the skulls I needed really quick. I then gathered a lot of soul sand, as that was the last component to make all the withers I would need. When I arrived home, I made reinforced obsidian and a grinder. Together, they would make a wither chamber where I could kill the wither with safety. Wither and safety don't generally go in the same sentence, but for now they do. I made a 3-hide chamber for spawning, and then placed a roof. I placed the grinder on the edge, built a wither, and backed up. Seconds later, it exploded and the wither died. This was too easy, I thought to myself. I repeated the process a ton of times to get all the stars I needed. Once I got them all, I began smelting down the draconium I had. While waiting, I went mining to gather even more draconium, as I needed to make all the armor. Draconium is a rare ore that is used in crafting recipe of the most powerful weapons inside of all of modded Minecraft. I began smelting them down for the ores from the new quarries I had placed earlier. I expanded my base to have a new room for the draconic crafting stations. This would be what I would need to make the wyvern armor. The end was nearly upon us, and I had to be ready. All of a sudden, a zombie came out of the floor and attacked me. Their building and mining was becoming dangerous, as they could literally come from any side now and mine through my walls. I placed down 9 basic crafting injectors and an infusion table. After gathering all the supplies, I began placing them inside of the table and inside of the injectors. This would be what I would need to create the first piece of wyvern armor. After the recipe was complete inside of the injectors, I hit start and it began infusing with power. It would need a ton of power to craft. While I waited, I heard another scream and I went to investigate. something began shooting fireballs at me. I flew around to try and find who it was, but to no avail. I put some more potatoes in the furnaces, and then began making some invar. I'd need more of the alloy to speed up the wyvern armor crafting process. I broke up the old cables and placed the new ones behind it and sped up the process a little bit. I made the next tier of jetpack and started smelting down the armor for it. I also made an induction smelter. This would allow me to make the armor for the actual jetpack. I was going to use it as a chest plate, as the wyvern armor doesn't allow any form of flight, so I wasn't going to use a wyvern chest plate. I made the bronze plating and added it to my jetpack. I tried to enchant it, but you aren't allowed to enchant it in this mod pack. It was finally time. With the components done, I made a helmet, leggings, and boots. I then made a wireless power controller. With the Flux network, it would wirelessly charge anything in my inventory. I was nearly ready for the final battle. I knew I'd probably be breached at some point, so I got the villagers together and I made an enclosure. I then lined it with obsidian to make it even harder for any mobs to enter. Some of the villagers wouldn't cooperate, so I trapped them out like a good leader would. I then noticed I had a door leading out. Guys, whatever. With the box covered in walls, I placed turrets all along the edges. This was the final defense if the walls were breached. I began linking up all the turrets to flux ducts. It was nearly time. I made a ton of bullets and began filling up all the turrets nearby. Back and forth till all the turrets were filled. As a final measure, I made some TNT and placed it on the ground with some pressure plates. They were to act as landmines. And then in the chat, the blood moon was rising. It was time. As night fell, I began to shoot my bow over the walls at the incoming mobs. I then realized I forgot to power my turrets, so I rushed back to get a flux point. After powering them, they began firing. I continued using my bow to keep the zombies off the wall. Somehow, some were still getting in this early into the night. I knew I wouldn't be able to hold them back, but delaying them was my best shot. I noticed something flying on the ground, but I didn't know what it was. I also saw some creepy little spider, but my attention was taken away as zombies crossed the wall on all sides, leaving only the interior wall between them and my new base for the villagers. All the villagers huddled in the corner, and I took the chance and surrounded them in obsidian. I continued hailing arrows at the horde with all my turrets going off. The night had barely started, and they were already at my safety box for the villagers. I kept noticing these new strange creatures, but my attention was taken back to the zombies at hand. I began going around the outside of the walls, trying to peel off the zombies from getting to my villagers. My new wyvern armor was coming in clutch, as they couldn't get to me. I noticed a bunch of zombies had made their way under the box, and again, a new mob. I frantically swung at the zombies that made their way from the pit into the actual box. Then, outside my walls, giant parasite-like creatures stood taller than any mob I had seen. This was the next mutation, and I still had most of the night to go. The mobs were drawing closer and closer, but I continued bashing them away with my turrets relentlessly firing and my sword swinging. My villagers only had a prayer now to survive. The obsidian was doing good though, keeping them at bay. Some of my villagers fell into the hole near the zombies, and I accidentally hit them. Oopsies. But they were doomed, so I left them and began fighting the mobs outside. This was getting nuts. With the parasites and zombies everywhere, I didn't know where to go and fight. I had to turn my shaders off due to the lag. I fought all night, and the mobs clumped up more and more as the night went on. The jetpack kept me out of their reach, but the villagers had no way of escape. As daybreak came, I re-linked some of my turrets that had had their lines broken by the zombies during the night. I grabbed what little ammo I could make and refilled the turrets. I went around with my lava and began pouring it on all of the mobs that were left, burying them in a hot pool of molten lava. After some time, they were eliminated in my base, but now was for the moment of truth. I then began cleanup duty of all the lava I had placed. When I went back to the villager box to release them, babies came out. I don't want to know what happened in there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed surviving 100 days as an engineer as much as I did playing it.